In this video, we'll be going over how to expose for S-log2 on cameras such as the Sony A7 III or the Sony A7C, where S-log2 is recommended. Unlike the newer cameras, such as the Sony A7S III or the FX III, where S-log3 is primarily used, because on the Sony A7 III can only shoot in 8-bit color, by using S-log3 you won't be able to get enough saturation or contrast back without really heavily damaging or breaking up the image. So this shot right here is actually being shot on the Sony A7 III. S-log2 is primarily used in picture profile 7. Once you have selected picture profile 7, you can then go on to exposing for the clip. There is one main rule for exposing for S-log2, and that is to expose by +2 stops. Now what does this mean? If we were to look at our LCD screen, at the bottom you will see an M.M plus or minus a number. This number that would be at the bottom here somewhere is our exposure number, and what we want is this number to show up as +2.0. Now, a little bit of knowledge about this number. If this number was to show up as 0.0, that means that you are neither overexposed or underexposed. However, if this number was to show below 0 as a negative number, such as -1.3 or -0.7 or even -2.0, then you are underexposed by -1.3 or you are underexposed by -2.0, etc, etc. However, if the number was to show up as a -2.0 but it was flashing, this would indicate that you are more than 2 stops underexposed. We only need to be +2 stops overexposed, and what this would mean is that this number has to show up as +2.0. So this is the main information that you need to know. However, it is often easier said than done to achieve this, as in different situations and scenarios you might have different lighting situations where you're overexposed by over +2 stops, or you're underexposed and you can't reach those +2 stops of overexposure. If we were to start in a situation where there is too much light and we are overexposed by more than +2 stops, how do we fix this? Before we go into this, there's a few more basics I need to explain. The very first thing is your ISO value. Your native ISO on the Sony A7 III for S-log2 is 800. ISO 800 where we get the most dynamic range as well as the least amount of noise. Unfortunately, when shooting on S-log2 on something like the A7 III, we cannot go below this ISO value, and therefore shooting in bright daylight during the daytime, ISO 800 can be a lot of light, which is not ideal. The second basic thing you need to understand is what metering mode to use, as there are many different metering modes. However, I recommend to use multi or to use spot. In this case, we are using spot. And in the 5 years that we've been using the Sony A7 III, I've just left it on spot and it's worked great most of the time. The reason I choose to use spot is simply because we shoot a lot of people or subjects and we want to expose a lot of the times for that individual subject. Say if I'm the subject in this case, all I want to do is make sure the subject is exposed correctly. I don't care about the background, I don't care about the highlights, I just care about the subject. However, there are times when you don't want to compromise the highlights or you don't want to compromise the shadows, then you have to creatively choose where you want to set your exposure. And that is a limitation of the Sony A7 III because of its low dynamic range, though the dynamic range isn't too bad. So now I'm going to quickly go over how to expose in brighter conditions. And this is where you need something called a neutral density filter, or an ND filter. So I actually have my ND filter on my camera right now, but I will take it off and I will show you guys what the image looks like without the ND filter on. As you can see on the camera, the number indicates as +2.0, but it is flashing, which indicates that we are more than +2 stops overexposed. And what an ND filter does, it's basically sunglasses for your camera. This is a circular variable ND filter, and a variable ND filter allows you to change your strength of your ND. So these are basically sunglasses for your camera, and it allows you to darken the image, as you can see, like so. So this is the filter from K&F, and I have used this filter for about 4 years. It hasn't let me down, and I've used it mostly on my Sony 35mm f1.8, which we're using right now at f1.8. So if I was to then put this back onto the lens, we can see how it helps to correct the image or help us to control our exposure. So now that I've placed the ND filter on, you can see the image isn't as overexposed, and we brought the number down below a flashing plus 2.0. Now, as you can see, as I am moving around a little bit, the exposure values does change. Now, I am correctly exposed, as if I move my face more towards the circle, you will see that the number changes to plus 2.0 without flashing. Now, if you're within this realm of plus 1.7 or just at plus 2.0 and it might start flashing a little bit, then you're totally fine. It doesn't matter if you're a little bit overexposed or a little bit underexposed within this value, you just can bring this back within post. And the more and more you shoot with your Sony A7iii at S-log2, and the more you color grade and the more you edit, then you get a better grasp of, okay, I can shoot at plus 0.3 even, or plus 1.0, because I know the overall scene or the person is lit actually okay. And I've edited this before and I'm comfortable with editing this footage at this exposure rate. Because whenever we are shooting with clients who might be in a rush, or we're shooting projects and we don't have a lot of time and we just need it to be good enough. But a lot of times getting it perfect can help so much shooting things in post. The other two basics I did not mention at the beginning is your aperture as well as your shutter speed. With my aperture, if I was to shoot at f1.8 during a very bright sunny day, or where I have a light that is lighting me and it's just way too bright, what I will struggle to do is shoot at f1.8, and I will have to bump up my aperture and maybe to f11 or f10. Therefore, I will maybe have to shoot at f10 or f11, and that will remove all the bokeh within the image and the depth, and that may not be the image that you were trying to go for. So if you are trying to shoot at f1.8, f1.4, or even 2.8, you will sometimes, and you will often need an ND filter, because by putting on that sunglasses for your camera lens, you can start off with a darker image, bump down that aperture value to an f1.4 or to an f1.8. You can get that depth of field, that bokeh, and make your footage look a bit more creamy, let's say. And that's why ND filter helps with aperture during bright sunny days. So we'll try and go over how to overexpose underexposed images. So what you can see now is that we are actually underexposed. I can't see the value properly, but I'm guessing we're about a negative 0.7 or a negative 1. If I was to move, you'll be able to see the camera identifies the background, and that might be even exposed to below negative 2.0. So the problem with shooting underexposed, especially below 0.0, will cause your footage to really break up in post. If you're trying to bring back any of that contrast or saturation, or you're trying to brighten the image, you'll just get a very blocky, blotchy, just cracking up image, and it won't be great. And you kind of want to pull your hair out, because I've been there when I first started out. But that was what kind of allowed me to really improve on my color grading. And that's what the Sony A7iii is awesome for, because it teaches you to be kind of resourceful, understand color grading, understand editing, and how you can make okay footage really good. In this case, if you're underexposed, you don't have an ND filter on, you're shooting at f1.4, at a wide aperture, you're shooting at 24 frames per second, so you're at f1/50th, so you can't put your shutter speed even lower, or else you'll just get very choppy images. The only thing that you can do is introduce light. Now, in a lot of circumstances, if you are shooting outside at night time, shooting a documentary, then you might not be able to introduce any extra sources of light. Yes, you may have your phone, you can do a torch, but that usually is not bright enough. Therefore, if you can't introduce extra lighting and you are underexposed below 0.0, I recommend you switch gammas altogether and use something like HLG3. With HLG3, I will go over in a different video, but for now, I want to showcase how you can introduce more light. There are loads of portable lights that you can use. You can turn lights on. So if I was to turn the light on of this room right here, you'll be able to see that the value has gone up slightly. However, this light isn't the most flattering or the brightest. As you can see, we are still very much underexposed. So I got this light from Amazon, which costs about £70, which is about $90 US, and it's called the Yongnuo YN360. And I saw Danny Givitz use it, and I thought, why not give it a go? So if I was to put this on, you can see it's pretty bright, and you'll be able to see the value on the camera has just shot up, and we're now probably above plus 2.0 and it is flashing. Therefore, what we can do, if a light is too bright, we can either turn it down or we can just move it away from us. So if I was to move the light maybe about here-ish, we'll be able to see that we are now a little bit more better exposed. If I was to move my head towards where the center dot is for the spot metering mode, you'll be able to see that we are almost hitting, hopefully, the plus 2.0. If we are not, we can either bring this light closer and hopefully we've hit it. So that's why I always recommend you take a portable light with you if you know it's going to be a little bit dark where you're shooting, whether that's inside, shooting an interview, or that's outside during the night time. You can always have an assistant or a friend hold up a light. And if you don't have that, you can always use a tripod plate with a light like this, stick it on the tripod and just shoot. And that's something that I've done a lot when I've shot by myself. So I hope this has been helpful and that you understand now a little bit better on how to expose for S-log2 when in very bright conditions as well as in very underexposed conditions. And of course in the future, I will go over how to expose for HLG3. So yes, thank you.